How to be an artist. Step 34. Show them what they can't see. With guest, Jason Young.
Jason Young, welcome to How to Be an Artist. Welcome back to How to Be an Artist.
Second time.
Second time. You held up one finger when you said second time.
Second time. I meant to do two. It's better this way.
Yeah, last time we didn't have video, so this is going to be more interesting.
I'm already twice as sweaty as last time. Three times as pretentious.
I know. I can see the sweat beads on the HD camera.
Oh no.
Yeah.
This
kidding.
is an MacBook Air, high quality camera. How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. And it's also, there's been a lot of COVID stuff, and so our normal way of hanging out has usually been, going to the coffee shop and hanging out. We talked a bunch about that in the last episode about kind of how Blue Copper was trying to survive. Yeah. And I know you could basically do like drive up mode or something during the pandemic, but it's back, like the actual physical space is open now again, right? Both locations.
We're all open inside. We're running like really limited hours.
Really?
I can't say for certain why that is. I think it's just one big reason is just staffing. I think it's really hard to find people who want to work right now.
Yeah. And
so we're kind of running just 8-hour days, like 8 to 3.
Did you lose some people over the whole thing?
It's hard to say we lost them. We're not missing them. We we laid off 2 people at our store.
Okay.
Who one of them actually we brought back, and they worked for like a week again or something, and then they just decided like, I'm going a different direction with my life. So and then the other one, actually, I think maybe we didn't lose anyone. I saw them working at the other store just the other day. So everyone that we lost has done some work for us still. Everyone's in good. We're all friends still.
Yeah, that's good. You stuck around long enough.
Yeah. It's crazy how good of retention we've had through the coronavirus. We were closed for 3 months. And then, like you said, we were doing like kind of like drive up window service type thing for over a year, I think.
Yeah.
And then just recently we've been doing come in and get a coffee service and sit down service, and which to me, like, it coincided with us being fully vaccinated.
Yeah.
And so I feel like at first, like when we shut down originally, it was all just because of concern of our own health.
Yeah.
And like we didn't want to be a part of the problem either, like spreading, like having people share the same space or anything. Mm-hmm. But at this point, like, and maybe I don't think this is that controversial. This is going to get the podcast demonetized.
No, I've been able to already successfully demonetize the podcast by making it having absolutely like no concern for any sort of demographic at all with the podcast.
Oh yeah. There's just like the pennies that roll in there. Yeah. Like nobody's worried about taking away from you.
Absolutely no one is worried about what I say on this podcast. I can guarantee you that.
But it's just at this point, like you could go to Costco and get a shot today of the vaccine.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, it's kind of on you if you don't want to be safe from the coronavirus at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know. How do you feel about that? Or do you not want to weigh in?
No, I'll talk about that. I was going to ask you the very same question, but just about, there's definitely still some really strong feelings about the vaccine. Some people are still really, really get really upset that other people aren't getting vaccinated. So my overall feeling is like, I don't want to be dogmatic about like my approach to it, because it's not going to change anyone's opinion either way. Like if I'm shaming someone for not wanting to get vaccinated, like that's going to accomplish nothing. I kind of feel like, I feel like it makes sense for me. I got vaccinated. My wife's been vaccinated. we still need to get our daughter's 12. And so we've been meaning to get her vaccinated, but we haven't done that yet, you know? And, I feel like it's kind of that place right now where it's like, it seems like it's mostly affecting those who choose not to get vaccinated. It's not as much, there was more of a feeling in the midst of things, particularly like last fall, where it's like, okay, I could potentially give it to someone else. Like that was more of a concern then. Yeah. So it's just less of a concern now. And even there's been a little bit of a rise in cases like locally, but the death rate hasn't really, I just looked at this yesterday. The death rate hasn't really changed that much. So, I don't know. That's kind of how I feel.
I think we're basically in the same camp.
Yeah.
Like I am definitely not judgmental. Like I was saying to you before, like I feel like I had more severe side effects from the vaccine than plenty of people I heard.
Yeah.
And I was still happy to get it, and I would get it again. Unless I don't have to get another one, then I won't.
Yeah.
Because just like, because it seems like people who have been, to me, at least looking at minor data, it seems like people who get the vaccine aren't hospitalized, which again was my major concern.
Yeah.
And so since I didn't need hospitalization after getting the vaccine, any side effects are better than that. So.
Yeah, what you're saying is basically if you get the vaccine, even if the vaccines may vary a little bit in how much they actually prevent COVID, but all of them are super effective at preventing like hospitalization, if I remember correctly.
Yeah,
and death, and that's the main thing. I mean, if you can,
to me,
yeah. Well, I think not dying is also high priority to me. You probably assume that's most people are thinking about that. So yeah, when we were talking before we started, you were talking a little bit about some of your like psychedelic experiences, which I guess this happened during COVID, right?
Yeah, like we just more free time than usual. There's more. Well, psychedelic. Yeah.
Which is Please. it's always like everyone always wants to talk about psychedelics and hear about psychedelics. It's like I don't know. I feel like with the podcast, really, what I should have done a long time ago, and I probably should still do, is like do an episode that's just talking to someone about psychedelics, because that's like kind of seems like that's guaranteed gold for any podcast is having that discussion at some point. So, but we
should have talked about this before we got you demonetized. Yeah.
Yeah.
Too late.
I know. Now it's going to do me no good. I've been stripped of my riches.
Do you have like a friend in the back of your head that's like a expert or anything, or just what? Yeah.
I actually have a few people in mind that I'm interested in talking to about psychedelics, and the people I want to talk to about it are all people that have like a lot of experience with meditation too.
Yeah.
Because I'm really interested. I think that there's an overlap with meditation and psychedelics in some sense, and I'm really curious. I'm specifically curious in talking to people that have chosen to do both, and kind of understanding like why, like what do you get? What are the unique benefits you get from each of those things? Because kind of one of the things that happened to me is that I was very interested in psychedelics until I started doing meditation. I had kind of my peak experience with meditation that kind of really changed things for me. And after that point, I lost a lot of interest in psychedelics.
Interesting.
And I've been more curious again since then. It doesn't feel as before. There was felt more of this like existential urgency. Like there was something in my life that just wasn't right. And I felt like I needed to do psychedelics to like fix that or resolve that or open up, I don't know, get me out of some sort of like pattern or cycle that I was in. And meditation kind of did that for me. And so I don't have that same existential urgency about doing psychedelics. I mentioned this briefly too before, and I've mentioned this on the podcast. So I won't go into too much detail on it, but last summer when I was kind of in the midst of like, doing heavy meditation, and I was starting to have like some negative side effects from meditation. Like one day, for unrelated reasons, unrelated to meditation, I decided to do like a micro dose, like of mushrooms.
Mm-hmm.
And I've microdosed a ton in the past, like not a ton, but I've done
Yeah.
it enough. And actually, I've been super responsible about it. Every time I microdosed, I would keep like a log. And
Mm-hmm.
I do it when I didn't have like family around. And so I have like the spreadsheet. I had the spreadsheet there. So I'm keeping track of every single experience, how much I'm taking,
Yeah, do
yada, yada, yada.
mushrooms and don't get anywhere close to people you love.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
all very low doses, like super low doses. This is not like going on a trip doses. It's like giving you a little bit of a high. So very light
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And I did a microdose last summer while I was having some kind of negative meditation experiences at the same time. And it's kind of like those two things kind of interacted.
Yeah.
And I ended up, I did this dose and I'm like, okay, I could feel it kind of coming up. And then I could just feel like this anxiety coming on and like, oh, okay, this doesn't feel good. And then
Well, is that, can I ask you, was it anxiety, like what the negative experience of meditation was?
yeah, so yeah, let me describe that a little bit more. And I apologize.
Sorry if, oh yeah.
I mean,
Oh yeah, you've already went into detail on
but
this a
it's
little
okay.
bit. I'm sorry.
I'll
Oh,
describe
please.
it again. Maybe I'll describe it better. Sometimes you tell these things multiple times and you're able to kind of like work through the story better. And also, I don't assume that everyone's going to listen to every episode that
Mhm.
that listens to this podcast. But yeah, I had the basic arc for me was that I had this big high from meditation at a retreat, like this big
Mhm.
like peak experience. Felt like my depression was gone after that experience, and that I ended up having this euphoric experience where and it was kind of this equanimous state too that put me into where just nothing bothered me, and that went on for about 2 months, 2 or 3 months, where it slowly faded away. It was very very strong. Like I had some days. I remember during that period, everything was great, and I would have a day where something went wrong and like felt crappy, and it would just be like this shock to me, like, oh my gosh, I don't this is bothering, like something that bothered me was like surprising to me just because I felt so good and okay about everything all the time during that period.
Mhm.
And that kind of slowly faded away, and my practice kind of went into this phase where it just was kind of like it was hard to kind of settle my mind, and I was feeling kind of irritable and stuff. And I decided to start focusing on concentration practice, which I was doing. I was
Mhm.
doing what's called like within the category of like Vipassana, which Vipassana is like, it's more about investigating this, like your experience from moment to moment. Like
Yeah.
the standard Vipassana practice, well, body scans is a big one. That's where you like are scanning your body over and over. The other one is noting, and noting is just like where you're labeling your experience from moment to moment. So it's like, okay,
What you're labeling it, so it's like that's your way of like recognizing your thoughts or whatever.
yeah, that's the practice. And it's not just thoughts. I mean, thoughts can be included in that. So, but you're gonna label everything you experience, just like a stream of like labeling. So it's like you're you feel a sensation in the hands, and you're like, okay, sensation. You feel like a coolness someplace, coolness. It can be I'm thinking, I'm listening. You're just labeling whatever it comes into your attention, and it becomes this
Mhm.
stream where you're just like, thinking, feeling, coolness, itch, irritation, tiredness, ache, and it just kind of goes on like that.
Yeah.
You're just labeling,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
it can get really, really fast. Like you just start labeling really, really fast. You can slow down. There's lots of different versions of it. That's kind of the practice I was doing
Sure.
when things were just feeling kind of like icky and irritable and stuff like that and restless. And so I started to do concentration practice, and concentration practice is just like focusing on the breath. So I was doing focusing on the breath, but I was also doing like metta, which is like you are repeating phrases that kind of cultivate positive feelings. So you're repeating these phrases of like love, like may I be
Mhm.
well, may I be happy, may I have peace. You just kind of repeat that over and over and over again, and
Yeah.
you focus on this good feeling. This good feeling starts to emerge, and you just feel this like love or whatever, And then breath is similar, where you just focus on the breath, you focus on your mind kind of going quiet, and then over time your mind gets really, really quiet, your attention on the breath gets stronger, and you start just having these very, very pleasant experiences. And I just focused on that for about 2 months, and my concentration got pretty strong after doing like an hour a day for 2 months. My concentration got pretty strong after I did that. And when I came back, I started doing noting again. And when I started doing noting, everything just like was on fire. Like sensations, it was just very, very sustainable, very pleasurable. It's like it increased like the sensitivity of all my sensory perceptions. So it's probably similar to doing. I mean, we can talk about your
Definitely
psychedelic experience soon, but yeah, it caused this kind of hyper arousal is how I think about it now, where the visual field was just like very rich, and it's just like, wow, this feels amazing. Like I could just feel all these sensations throughout my body. And so it was a very euphoric feeling. And so I went through this period where I was having all these highs when I was meditating. And like one experience in particular, I was in my backyard, and it was just like the colors were intense and everything was like, and again, this is without any drugs. This is all just with like meditation, right?
Yeah.
I remember having this experience where I'm sitting in my backyard and I just like sit back and I look up in the sky, and I just said the sky just like blew me away. It's just the depth of the sky just seemed to like go on forever, and the clouds, and I was just like tripping looking up at the sky.
And this was during a noting practice.
Yeah, this is during noting. Oh, this is actually after. So I did a session of noting, and then I just went out and sat in the backyard, and my mind was totally quiet. Like the mind quieted down, and I was just like soaking in all the sensory information. Like that happens sometimes when you meditate. You get this kind of like momentum going, and then after a while, you don't have to do anything. It's just like your mind is quiet, and the mind is meditating by itself almost. So it's kind of one of those moments. And then, so I had this amazing experience, and I had a few experiences like that. And then after this particular one, I was like making a log. I was writing this log, and I'm just like, wow, I'm just like, feel like I've got fire shooting out of my fingertips. It's all these really intense feelings. And then I started having, as I'm writing this log, for the first time, I'm like, oh my gosh, what am I doing to my mind? Like, this is like intense. And that was my first like moment of like kind of anxiety about how things were going. And then that night I had this crazy like apocalyptic dream where it was just like mushroom clouds, and it was just like it was the first time I've had scary dreams before, but I've never had scary dreams that were like apocalyptic, as far as like the world is ending. And I just woke up from that dream and just like sweat, and I was just completely terrified. And that was kind of the beginning of so I had this big high, and then I kind of had this big crash that kind of went for a few months through the summer. And it was punctuated by moments. It wasn't like I felt shitty all the time. It was just like I would be kind of fine, and then I would have just this like a really bad experience. And so one of these occasions, I had taken this microdose, and then I just started feeling this anxiety coming on, and it kept getting worse. And I just told my wife, like, hey, I'm sorry. I didn't expect this. I've got this anxiety coming up. I'm going to go just like lock myself in the room.
Yeah.
So I go into my room, and it keeps getting worse and worse. I took a shower to try to like calm myself down. And it just felt like fingernails on the chalkboard, that kind of feeling, but like just like all through my body. Like my whole body was just like, and I couldn't escape it. And I ended up on my bed, just like having these convulsions. Like it started like causing these convulsions where I was like shaking, and like my core would like kind of contract, and I was like punching in the air and stuff. Like it was really weird. And so that happened, and I was like, okay, I guess I shouldn't take mushrooms. Like I didn't quite make the connection between meditation, and I was continuing my practice. And a few weeks later, without mushrooms, the same thing happened, where just this anxiety came up, and I went to the room and just started having convulsions again.
Do you think it's like blood pressure stuff that like gives you convulsions, like where it's just like you're like sending way too much like blood into your frontal cortex or something like this? Or
No,
I don't.
I've read there's a little bit of science about that. That's kind of why I talk about the hyperarousal is because I subsequently I found there's this organization called Cheetah House that looks at adverse meditation effects,
Mhm,
and they talk about this process of hyperarousal. The one thing
mhm,
that can happen with meditation is that you make yourself so sensitive to like perceptual stuff, right? The hyper you because you're quieting everything else down so much that it
mhm.
causes this feedback where your body becomes super hypersensitive to whatever sensations. And so then when you have
Yeah.
negative sensations, then it's like, oh shit, because it's really, it kind of overwhelms you. So I guess to wrap it up, I mean, I ended up having like some really intense experiences. And then I like talked to my teacher and she's like, stop meditating for a while. And I stopped meditating and kind of came back down to earth. But anyway,
Uh,
that
yeah,
was
yeah. I I started. I did do some meditation in the last 2 years,
okay.
probably since the last time we talked. To. Do you know how long ago it was we talked last?
It was last year. It
Like
might have been
on the
almost a year
podcast.
ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't stick with it for that long. Probably a few months or something.
Yeah.
I feel like uh,
How much
and
were you doing and what were you doing? I'd be interested to know like what.
it was I was doing way more casual, and it was
Yeah.
like 15 minutes a
Okay.
day,
Okay.
and just like kind of paying attention to breath, and then but then also just trying to recognize anything that I couldn't keep from thinking, I guess, like
Okay.
just like anything that came, I would just try to appreciate it. And I felt like what was funny, or to me, just like listening to what you were saying, it's like when I started doing that, like as a routine and everything,
Uh-huh.
it seemed like there was like this awareness that it felt like I was meditating all the time. Then,
Hmm.
have you felt that way? I
Yeah.
guess so. It
Yeah.
sounds like you have.
Yeah.
Like just because you're always like staying in that like aware state,
Mm-hmm.
and then after doing it for a few months, I started um, just like, yeah, feeling like I'd always have that with me. Like I was paying too much attention. And so then I just went the opposite direction, like where I was like, I need to just drown out because like I don't understand the point of noticing.
Yeah.
And so like I was just like, I'm just gonna like play podcasts every minute,
Mm-hmm.
play video games while listening to podcasts, like and just like, no, I don't know, like I just went the opposite direction and just stopped doing it, like because I was just like, it's so boring to me. Have you ever had that?
I mean, boredom definitely comes up with it, but yeah, there's also
Yeah,
the sense of like, I mean, it kind of strips away things, and so you're
yeah,
paying attention to all this stuff underneath that you normally we have all these ways we've like learned to not have to deal with like difficult stuff that's underneath, and it's
yeah,
like you're kind of taking that away, and so it's then like, okay, so what do you do with all that that uncomfortable stuff that's
sure.
underneath, and you have to figure out new ways to work with that, and so that's
um
a huge challenge.
my like starting to meditate, I think it was like during that first like sort of like time that I was doing just like way more casual meditation than
Yeah.
you. I never had like a um hyper awareness type
Yeah.
things. But during that time, I is when I decided to take mushrooms the first time too,
Okay.
and and I, like a crazy person,
Hmm.
decided to mix medications
Okay.
while doing mushrooms. I've only done mushrooms twice, and both times, like I accidentally smoked way too much weed each time,
Okay.
and I totally went crazy at first. Like I was afraid to leave my apartment for hours.
Hmm. Wait, you
In a
were
really,
you totally by yourself the first time you did it?
I am a solo person.
Yeah.
It doesn't even sound tempting to me to do it around other people, but that's kind of crazy, right? Like you wanted a guide and everything.
I think it makes sense to kind of have someone there to make sure
Sure.
you don't jump off a bridge or something
I was,
to kind of bring you back to reality and stuff like that.
you know what's crazy? I think I've said, do you know what's crazy 4 times
Yeah.
already? And I've said nothing crazy yet. So I should stop using that phrase. But no, I did it by myself. And then I waited like 45 minutes. And this is over a year ago. So
Yeah.
like I could remember very little, or not very little, but just, I don't remember everything.
Yeah.
But like I waited like 45 minutes and nothing was happening at all. I couldn't feel anything. And I was just like, the internet's not helping me understand this well enough. And I like just wasn't feeling anything. And then I was like, I should just see if marijuana helps. And I was just going to do like a little bit, but then I don't know how subconscious it was, because this happened both times I did it though.
Uh-huh.
But like I ended up doing 10 times more than I usually do. And then immediately the effects of both of those together kicked in.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this is, you've done mushrooms.
You said you did about
Okay.
3 grams, you think? 3 grams of mushrooms?
This first time that I'm talking about, it was probably more like 1 gram.
Okay.
It was not very much. Like I was not trying to be too crazy, but I
Yeah.
definitely had an experience.
Okay.
And let me think. But so for me, I felt like I went completely crazy, and this is while I was doing meditation practice stuff.
Yeah.
And so I actually decided, I was like, I don't want to feel crazy, and I want to feel like I am in control.
So tell me,
so I decided,
tell me
Yeah, go
what
ahead.
was it about the experience that made you keep saying I felt crazy. What was it about the experience that made you feel crazy?
Oh, sure.
I want the
It
juicy
felt,
details.
oh yeah, sure. I feel like it's like I was coming out of myself, right? And seeing what I felt like I really was, or how I would view myself if I wasn't myself, right?
Yeah.
And I decided like, oh man, your whole life is a joke and you're a joke. And I think that about everything, actually.
Yeah.
So it's not like that big of it's not an accusation or anything. It's just like, what is this all, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then you wonder, like this fundamental question: what is the point of being alive now? And what's the point of this experience? And what's the point of doing it tomorrow?
Mhm.
And so you like question your very, just basically suicidal thoughts, right?
Yeah.
And nobody turned me into anything. I like actually am very happy to be alive. But I think about suicide every day, though.
Yeah.
Um,
Like in a conceptual way.
Conceptually,
Yeah.
Like I feel like I'm reading Camus right now.
Yeah.
And he says that
Is he the one that says it's the only question that matters? Or is that another?
he says something like that it's the only question that matters.
Yeah.
But he also says that like that's like the fundamental question, like where it's like nothing else matters until you get past whether you should decide to want to continue or not.
Yeah. I think
that's fair too.
That's like a big question. I think it's all about that. But it's also about, I mean, so many people are just kind of in this nowhere zone where they aren't really answering that question of, it's like, it gets back to like the line from, what is it? The prison movie where what's his name escapes from
Shawshank
Redemption. Yeah.
Sure,
Shawshank
Tim
Redemption.
Robbins.
He says, get busy living or get busy dying. And the answer,
And that philosophy's everywhere too.
yeah. And I feel it's
I love
basically
it.
like the whole point of life. And this is like, I think about spirituality. Like spirituality is like a really controversial term, but I think that's really like, that's what spirituality is about, is answering that question definitively, is like, is this worth it?
Yeah.
You know, is it worth it? Is it worth living? Then live, you know?
Yeah.
But so many people are just kind of like, they're not even answering the question. They're kind of miserable. They're waiting for something to happen, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, no, sure. And you were saying something like adjacent to this, and so I just wanted to say it clearly, though, is that I felt like for me everything is mental, like when it comes down to psychedelics and stuff. And so to me, it is like hyper meditation, or it's like tapping into like that deep part of meditation.
Yeah.
Like the awareness that you're describing. or I was saying this earlier, like, cause I still remember this moment. So I was trying to just go on a walk outside.
Mm-hmm. This was during your first experience.
First time after yeah. Like, but first thing first, I had to like look at myself in the mirror, accept that whether that this is the thing that I am,
mm-hmm.
and that that looks like a joke to me,
mm-hmm.
but I need to decide whether I want to be alive or not be alive.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided that I wanted to be alive. And I was laughing hysterically for hours too. It's all kind of crazy, but I actually, like, while I was looking in the mirror, like once I decided I wanted to be alive, I was like, okay, then I need to like figure things out for a second. And so I actually did 15 minutes of meditation while I was on psychedelics and completely insane, just to like center myself. Like, I just wanted to know that if I needed to let myself go to be alive, but I needed to first, for me, to understand that I could control myself if I did, if things went too far or something. And I needed to do that all before I could leave my house even. Like, I couldn't open the door. I could open the door. It's not like a Louis Buñuel film or anything. Like, I could, but like just didn't want to.
Yeah.
But then I realized also I had a lot of obsessive compulsive patterns that I don't think I accepted before. In that moment. I think I really took a good look at myself and understood myself really well after feeling those ways. And the reason I knew that I had these obsessive compulsive things is every time I was about to leave, I thought of some other reason to stay and check off things. And then I had to create a song that made me feel comfortable enough to leave my house. I could teach it to you. It just goes like this. It just says, all I need are my keys. Because that's all you really need.
That's true.
And so then I made sure I had my keys, and then I went out on this adventure, and it felt like, because to me, I don't know, the way I contextualized it was like, outside was living, outside is like your potential death. And I went outside and I went into the sunshine, and like, I still remember the sun beaming down on me, and then feeling, it's like, I've never felt more alive than I do right now. And just when it comes to meditation or whatever, like, it felt to me like this stupid revelation that I'm sure everyone has anytime they take mushrooms or whatever. It felt like I was noticing the difference between what I was like off of these drugs or whatever. And it just felt like I was turning the intensity of life up, the vibrancy, like 20 times or something, right? And it occurred to me, or at least I think that it occurred to me, that different people have different sort of matter-of-fact intensities of life, right? Like, and I feel like mine's actually low. I feel like I live in a deprivation chamber. Like, I don't even notice most things. And so when I'm on mushrooms, it's like, maybe it's just like what other people live like sometimes, and you're able to tap into these things with just meditation. I wasn't able to. I might not have tried so hard.
How long were you meditating? You said
a few months.
A few months. So maybe like two or three.
I think probably at least 3 months, but I didn't ever keep a journal.
And you're doing like 15 minutes a day, but like how consistently you're doing 15 minutes a day?
It was every day.
It was every day.
I'm actually pretty good at routines.
Yeah, I mean, doing that level of meditate, like, that's actually like a great way to start I mean, I started at doing 15 minutes a day when I first started meditating, and it like increased 5 minutes here and there until I was doing like half an hour before I did my first retreat. And I just think it's just a matter of time. Like, like, it's one of those things where you need to have enough hours of doing it before stuff really starts to, like, break open. And I still am am pretty new at it, and there's a lot more places to go. But yeah, there's a couple of things that I thought were interesting about what you were talking about that I feel like I relate to, and you can tell me if this is not an accurate representation of your experience or not, but
Yeah, let's hear it.
or if it's interesting or not. Yeah, one is I think there's something that both psychedelics and meditation kind of reveal, and it is and that kind of I think humans have to. This is kind of one of the problems we have to figure out with this problem of being alive. Is like the truth is that we are utterly and completely vulnerable. You know, there's like that's one of the realities is like we could all die at any moment. We're far more fragile than we appreciate. But there's this paradox where we also need to like feel safe. And it's like safety, a feeling of safety is still like very important to being a healthy human being.
Yeah.
And that's something that I kind of went through was like, I've had these experiences of feeling like, oh geez, like I could die at any moment, like through meditation. But then
Can I
also,
ask one quick question just related to your previous experience about your anxiety? I was actually thinking the same thing. Like, I'm wondering, like, when you were having anxiety, when you were meditating, was there any was there anything that was compromising your comfort, or like, were you feeling sick in some ways? Like, was something wrong with your body in a way? Just because like usually I link those things to anxiety for me.
Oh yeah. So I would say that my anxiety presented itself physically. It felt physical more than anything. There's sometimes maybe there's this almost this subtle glassy sheen to everything when I have anxiety, where things feel a little bit like crisper, and a little more like high contrast. But it was all physical. It was all like somatic, and that's why those kind of fingernail on the chalkboard feelings I was telling you about. That was like when that was going through my body, just this like energy or whatever. That I was trying to like just let it flow through me, but it's like my body's not accustomed to that, and so my body's just like, just like just going crazy. But yeah, so there's that. But what else was I going to say about? Oh yeah, the other.
Yeah, sorry.
You were talking a little bit about like sense of self. And like this sense of like identity. And that's also the other big thing I think about those experiences and the practices of meditation. I don't know if I have anything meaningful to say about that right now, but True. I mean, I with both things you hear about like stories of the boundaries between self and the rest of the world kind of dissolving. And at least from what I hear from other long-term practitioners over time, that oh yeah this is what I was going to say, that's I've heard it described this way, that you talked about the intensity of the experience, how everything was dialed up. And I've heard some people describe it that there's kind of a filter that we have normally, and that filter is kind of the sense of self, like our self kind of filters out our sensory experience. And some people describe meditation, or kind of the results of meditation, as you're slowly kind of turning that off. And so it isn't so much that dial's turning up. It's just that there's this filter that's kind of getting in the way of perceiving that. Our attention is so much wrapped up in this idea of self that we're not paying attention to.
It's like you're breaking through layers of ego always. Yeah. And so like you remove some of those, and then you feel like your safety net go away.
Yeah, and those things are connected too. It's like your kind of the sense of self goes away, and it feels like this dial is turned up, but all that sensory information was already there. It's just now that your consciousness is like aware of it, or it's not being blocked out. But then also, it makes you feel completely like unmoored. There's no like ground. You have no self to like hold on to anymore. So I think that's a big part of the experience, is like learning to, and this is where I think what you get from meditation that you may not necessarily get from psychedelics, is you're practicing over and over again, kind of being in that place and kind of learning to get comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And so eventually you can be like, okay with like yourself dissolving or or whatever, something like
Yeah.
that.
And I feel like I'm kind of glad that I waited until I had some stability with meditation before I did a lot of these things,
Yeah.
because just because like what you're saying, like I feel like I was sort of comfortable like dissolving my ego to some
Okay.
extent.
Yeah.
And and then just to tie this into Neanderthals, um, I just have this question. Was it just because to me, like it just this is kind of a non sequitur, but
Okay.
we don't need to change the subject actually. But I was
How
just thinking
dare you?
about how much like language is like something that like we have these like vibrations or whatever, and like we intern these as English to each
Mm-hmm.
other and stuff, and we're like decoding this language and we understand each other. And it just seems like that's like there's a lot of like brain power that you don't, that's like subconscious, that you're doing to be able to do what we're doing here, right?
Mm-hmm.
And and this is just my question is, do you think that Neanderthals could understand English? Because do you know what I mean? Is like,
Don't they think that Neanderthals had language?
I think that people suspect that they may have. I don't know that there's a
Yeah.
way to know though. But I think that you could suspect so, because like they're like
So
like
are you,
chimpanzees have primitive
yeah.
types of languages and stuff.
I mean, you're saying is it possible? I mean, it's definitely possible,
Yeah, yeah,
right? I think it's likely. I mean, the
yeah.
fact that there was so much interbreeding too. I
Hmm.
know I've
Oh
got
yeah,
Neanderthal. I didn't have Neanderthal DNA, so
you've done your
oh yeah,
21 and Me or whatever.
yeah,
Is it
yeah.
23 and Me probably, right?
23andMe,
How
yeah.
stupid do I sound right now? 21 and Me.
Completely
Like,
idiotic,
can you drink
moron.
alcohol? Yeah. Do you have any follow up questions or anything? I'll let you conduct the interview.
Yeah, this is my podcast,
Yeah,
Jason.
please. I got it.
No, no, I like that you ask questions. It makes it interesting. It gives me less work to do if you're asking questions. You
Yeah.
should be the one with the podcast.
No, no, sir.
Okay, so this is the first of two experiences. So I want
Yeah.
to. I'm also interested in what was the what was the motivation to do these two trips? Like, what made you decide?
Man, I don't think about my life that much. I think like in the like this is another thing. I don't want to like I didn't get a diagnosis. I don't go to doctors very often, but
Yeah.
like I think that I might have some mild uh disorder of some kind. I don't even want to
Okay.
put a name to it. And so I think, but basically, I think I just don't have that much recollection of like the past, or like I feel like I'm really in the moment most of the time.
Okay. Okay.
And so like when asked to explain like why I thought of something or said something, I have no answers most of the
Okay.
time. And so like why did I do it? Like it was like an opportunity, like I maybe I'll just start here. So I had never done any drugs, smoked a cigarette. I didn't drink alcohol until I was 24. And
Hmm.
then I've really not gone into it or been drunk very many times,
Yeah.
because I don't know, like every time I drink a few beers, I'm just like, that's enough. And so I never did any, like smoked marijuana or anything. And then when I turned 35, nobody on this is a visual podcast, and so nobody will believe I'm over 35, but I promise you that I had a 35th birthday. And I smoked marijuana for the first time. And I remember writing on my hand, this is worthless, because I didn't want to forget that. And
It's like Memento. You're like, you
yeah,
wake up. That was great. Oh wait, hold on a second. I've got a note from.
I'm glad that you brought up a good movie
Yeah.
for once. No,
Okay.
you
Thank you.
probably like good movies.
I
Sometimes.
like some bad movies too. I'm sure.
Well, but anyway, so I smoked weed for the first time, and it actually, I've only had good experiences with anything,
Hmm.
and that's all thanks to my second experience on mushrooms.
Okay.
Because well, so the second, so I don't know why I did it the first time. It was like I had such a good experience with weed, I guess,
Yeah.
that it was just like, wow, I'm just happy all the time now. Anytime I smoke this, I just tap into like laughing fits and creativity. Like I get
Yeah.
obsessed with what I'm writing.
You've become I mean, you didn't do it when I first knew you. I remember you saying that, like, "Oh yeah, I've never smoked
Yeah.
weed, whatever." And I remember when you started, and it's become more of a regular thing for you now, right?
Yeah, actually, like I was telling you about side effects from the second dose of vaccine. So I
Yeah.
kind of stopped smoking weed because I started having what I think are heart problems.
Yeah.
And, and it like when and this is why I was asking you the previous question about, did you have any physical ailments that added to your
Yeah.
anxiety? But like
Okay.
once I started having like physical maladies, when I started smoking weed, it started triggering like what felt like high blood pressure assaults, kind of, that
Okay.
made my heart race. And I was already having mild heart problems, and so I felt like it was linked to my breathing problems and stuff like that I'd
Hmm.
started having. And so I've now not been doing anything. I've been sober in every way,
Okay.
and not even exercising, just a little exercise, this
Okay.
much.
Yeah.
But then, but oh yeah, but I love it though. I'll never say that I hate weed.
Okay.
Um, it's the best thing ever.
Okay, good. So you
And
have a reason. At least you've answered that question of, is life worth living?
yeah,
As long as you got some weed.
health is first and foremost. So,
Hmm.
so as long as it doesn't feel like I'm hurting myself, I like doing it. But then, so then somebody, I think, I'm not naming names here or anything, but just somebody said like, hey, like we have some mushrooms, like, do you want some? And then
Hmm.
they're like, you should just try it because it would be fun. And then I just feel like, I don't know. I feel like I'm indestructible or something. And that's why,
Hmm.
so I decided both times to do mushrooms without any supervision. And I've been reckless. Like I'll just like think about suicide, not even turn away from it. It's just like, you just look in the eye, you look yourself in the mirror and just say, it's like, I'm thinking about this and like, I'm picturing it and like, how could I do it? But I
Yeah.
don't want to.
Okay.
Um, and, so it was just recklessness. And
Okay.
then the second time, I'd already felt like it was like, oh, I had this experience. It was a super positive experience. I think it was like life affirming. I feel like I
The first
felt,
time was.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
because man, I didn't tell you this about the first experience, but I called our mutual friend Derek Hunter, so he
Hmm.
knew that I did it, and he didn't try to stop me.
Hmm.
Um, and
He knew you were going to do mushrooms beforehand, or he knew you were going to call you and didn't.
he answered the phone. That's all I could say for certain.
Okay.
But I called him while I was on mushrooms, though.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
man, every single thing that he said, like we were probably arguing about something, but
Hmm.
everything felt more and more perfect. Like everything in the universe was more aligned
Hmm.
the more things happened, is
Hmm.
how I felt. It was just like, it felt magical. And then, so then the next time I was just like, okay, I've had this really positive experience. It was like probably 4 months away from each other. Like I didn't go right back to it or anything.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I just said like, let's just see what else is there. Let's see what's the second time is like. And I took uh, a bigger dose, like I think probably 3 times as much.
Yeah.
And because the first time I didn't have any sort of visual stimulation or changes or anything. And I feel like so many people tell you about that component of it. And so I felt like maybe in some ways, even though I had such a positive experience, that maybe I was missing out.
Hmm.
And so this next time I took far more, like 3 times as much. I did, well, yeah. And then I just and then I smoked 10 times more weed than I usually smoke. And then and to make it more fun, and I hope this is interesting to anyone, but like
Yeah.
I actually had like a recorder, and I
Hmm.
decided, I was like, I should just record everything I say during my mushroom trip because I just want to see what I say or whatever.
Yeah.
And I haven't listened to the recording at all. But I set up a recording. I started like a hot bath. I took a ton of mushrooms. I smoked some weed. And then I just was seeing what was there and felt like I went insane again. I didn't have any sort of negative, suicidal, like introspective thoughts this time.
Again, when it was like saying you're going insane, is it again kind of feeling like you're looking at yourself from the outside type of feeling? Is that type of thing? Or
this time it was like when I closed my eyes, it was like I was looking through like the 16th cathedral or something, like where it was just like vivid imagery, like these like staircases that are like spiraling. And then I had this recorder which totally ruined my experience because then it was like a show that I was doing. Like I knew it was there every instance because I didn't dissolve. I was performing, and to me it's hilarious, but maybe it's not. But like it was just like, for me it was just like I was yelling things like the fantasy is more important than your life, and which means a lot to me actually. Just because it does seem like what we're doing is such a performance. And like, what's your ego? What's persona? But then after that, like, I was yelling like what I could see, like when I closed my eyes and stuff. It was all a performance. But then I started just like, I guess I thought what the next funniest thing was to just keep pretending like I was killing myself on the podcast. It's just like, I'm just going to drown myself now. I call it a podcast, but nobody could hear it. I haven't even heard it. But then I got out of the tub eventually. And then I was going to listen to music. I was like, that's because the guidance I got the first time I took drugs was just like, just do it and then watch cartoons.
Yeah.
And I don't like cartoons that much though.
Yeah.
So I decided I would listen to Jedi Mind Tricks.
Okay.
And I got into this like just like intro song, and it just has this religious minister or something. He's like this, like just about like the author of the Bible type stuff, and is like, this is heaven, and God made the light, and God made, and then the darkness or something like this. And I listened to this on repeat for like an hour and a half or something. And it just kept meaning more and more to me. Like this idea of just the lead singer completely embraces the dark parts of life, or the dark aspects of life, or like the darkness. And it just, I guess, like occurred to me, it's like, why do we only like what's good thing about life? Like, just life is all of these things.
Yeah.
And then I don't know, I feel like this is so boring to say, but it's like just so transformative to me. Since then, like, it's like so hard to make me sad in any way. Like, I just feel like everything about life is just spectacular now. And that's like months and months ago, but maybe I'll feel like you do one day. Just, I think, and then I went shopping while I was on mushrooms, and then I came down.
Like grocery shopping?
Yeah, I just did my grocery shopping. I was running errands. I walked to the store though. Yeah.
So that was a pretty long-term like effect then. I know people have talked about how like you do psychedelics, and I know they've talked about it as like an intervention for depression and stuff.
Yeah.
And they talk about how people will do it, and it's like half a year or longer that has effects, and then it's like, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah. I wonder if it's been more than a year ago since we recorded that podcast, because I feel like it's even been.
It's probably been more than that, because it was in the spring of last year, actually. I think.
Sure.
I started.
Yeah, it just seems like it's been almost a year since that last experience I had, even. And I haven't even thought about going back or doing more. It just seems to me like just the same thing I told you. Like I wrote on my hand, like this just seems worthless in some ways.
Well, last time you wrote that on your hand, you ended up starting a lifelong habit of.
Yeah. Like, but I've never forgotten though. It does still seem worthless though. Like, cause everything's great. but I don't know. I have to apologize to everyone. I didn't do a good enough job explaining anything.
I thought that was great.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Brandon Dane.
very,
You're the
very
only one.
interesting.
I hate you guys, not you. You're
Just everyone
cool.
else.
Yeah.
So since then, you've been feeling pretty good about life.
I was actually feeling good about life before then. I love my life.
Yeah. Has that been a recent change of loving life, or
no, man? Like I'm saying, is like I feel like.
Have you always felt that way?
Yeah, I'm a pretty easygoing guy. I've like and I started like. Do you know who Patrice O'Neill is?
Yeah.
Have you ever listened to him on the radio or anything?
I've watched like a couple clips of him. That's it.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Like I listened to his like podcast and everything, and he just has this like sort of like.
Hasn't he passed away?
Yeah, he died when he was 43 in like 2011.
Okay.
So like 10 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
But I don't know, like since the coronavirus and the quarantine and stuff, like I've just been isolating so much, and I realized that a lot of the art you consume so often like has to do with like socializing with other people that read the same thing as you or watch the same thing as you.
Mm-hmm.
And because I've been like there are just not as many communities, like we don't get together with Draw Night anymore or anything like that.
Yeah.
I've found that I've just been doing things that are older and not been a kind of a participant of like current media or movies or music or anything. So listening to a 10-year-old radio show seemed like a good idea. And anyway, Patrice O'Neill, like he just like he was like this kind of really overweight comedian. Mm-hmm. And just at different times he talks about his life. But I can't do it. I'm paraphrasing, but he basically just says like, you're always yourself. And so you have to love yourself. Like that's the initial state. And I really like obeying that principle, like where of just like loving yourself always. Mm-hmm. And I guess another thing to that is just like, I think that also means like forgiving yourself constantly. So I don't know, like maybe you just said a stupid story on a podcast or something, but then like, but that's in the past though. And you're like you right now. And so the first thing to do is just forgive yourself for what happened before, no matter how stupid it sounded. I think. What do you think?
I think it's a pretty healthy way to live.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever knew that about you. Has that been how you felt for quite a long time? Or do you think there was a point in your life where you kind of like came to realize that or decided to do that?
I think that, I mean, like I said, like I think articulating it the way I just did has been more recent. But I don't know. I feel like when I was a kid, I was just oblivious for 28 years. I give myself being a kid. And then since then, I've just been fine with myself. Things are great.
Well, what do you mean when you say oblivious? What does that mean?
I don't like, I think I felt young. I just like, I guess I do look back sometimes and just think like, I just always felt like motivated and happy and satisfied without questioning really what I was doing. Like, you look back at art projects you'd worked on or something, and you think like, oh, this is utter shit. Like, how was that person so happy with working on this or like this principle or like this writing or anything? I actually, I love all this stuff too, though. Like there's always something about anything I'm writing or working on that I like is a reason I loved it or was working on it. But I don't know. I guess all I'm saying is maybe I just felt like I'm like gaining reflection or something. Like it feels like I understand myself more and more as the older I get. I don't know. How do you feel about your past self or like,
Well, but what you're saying is in both phases, though, you're maybe more oblivious, but also kind of basically happy with life. And then you become more aware, but still basically happy with life.
yeah, I think that that's true. I think like I was like like I was capable of being sad at some points
Yeah.
in my life, like where it's
Uh-huh.
like um, you have, I don't know, like I guess you know what really changed me is like
Yeah.
uh, the I was with a girl that I don't want to bring up or anything on the podcast.
Yeah.
No shout outs for her. But like and I think I felt like this is what love is and everything.
Mm-hmm.
And that went away.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like just like regular mammal stupidity stuff, like where it was just like who does she think is better than me and everything. And actually I wrote a screenplay about this, and the whole point of everything was just like she's just like you and you don't even know how to define your own life. And so like getting answers from her isn't going to do you any good. And so so it's just pointless to ask these questions. Like and just better to like focus on yourself and build yourself from within,
So you've
or
really
whatever. And
you never felt like you've gone through any periods of like depression or anything like that, or
man, not
if
really.
you have a hard time like answering that question, the answer is probably no.
Yeah, I feel like well, and this is kind of what I was saying about that song in that mushroom trip, is
Yeah.
just that like life is just like phases, and it's like there are good times and there are bad times.
Mm.
And I just feel like embracing the whole thing and forgiving yourself for like being in bad mind states and stuff like that. So I think I mean, I've said it many times. I've said it too many times. Like we're going to get flagged for saying suicide. Um, but like, but that's definitely, so I've definitely been in mind states that are super negative. And, I was describing recently, like I was having breathing problems and heart problems. And
Mm-hmm.
then when I was smoking weed while I was in that state, it
Mm-hmm.
was like really creative periods for me. Like I loved it because, man, I don't know, just life. It's like good to feel negative too, right?
Sure.
I don't
I
know.
mean,
So it's
I can understand the idea behind that. It's not something that that is like I don't know if I've gotten to that point where it's just like, yeah, I appreciate feeling negative. That's something I'm actually trying to learn to do.
yeah.
Because
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
I think a lot of times I've had like shitty experiences in life, and I'm trying to justify the experiences or whatever unpleasant mind states, sensations, experiences, and I try to justify them conceptually. Where
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is going to be good because it'll lead to something better or
Yeah.
whatever. But I think it's a lot harder thing. One thing I'm trying to practice with more is to be grateful for the things exactly as they are. You
Yeah.
know, like you don't need some sort of like justification. Like I'm growing up Mormon, a big thing is like there's this phrase from the book. I think it's from the Book of Mormon. That says like you can't have the bitter without the sweet, or you can't have the sweet without the bitter. It's
Yeah.
like the whole reason there are difficult things in life is because the difficult things make the good things possible for you to experience the good things. But so there's a lot of justifications like that where it's like, oh, I'm going to do this because it's going to make this thing. It's going to feel better later, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the thing that I think is interesting right now is to have gratitude for some sort of unpleasant experience exactly as it is, and not doing it conceptually, not being like, oh, this is good, because not creating a reason in your head. I think that's the problem, is like you have some sort of unpleasant experience and you try to create a reason in your head why it's okay. instead of just like actually experiencing that thing fully and having like an attitude of like love or openness or gratitude to the actual experience. I mean, is that how
Yeah.
you kind of feel about those things, or
I
that's how
think
I'm
it
trying
is.
to approach them?
I think that is like kind of maybe how I describe it, just like openness. Like like I'm bringing up like the saddest point in my life is like the biggest points of growth for me.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
And like realizing that too. I had an experience recently like that where I was angry at someone and I was going to bed and just like I was throwing this tantrum. I was having this tantrum and just
yeah,
like I my instinct was to just like beat up on myself for like, why are you throwing this tantrum? Like, why are you acting like a baby? Like, why are you so mature? But kind of the second thought was like, wait a second, this is a chance for me to like grow, or this is a sign of something that's worth like looking at in my life that needs to be addressed. I don't know. Do you think of those things in that way, or?
yeah. I mean, like I kind of try to segregate patterns or something. Like you see, like what is the you try to like answer the question so you're capable of answering.
Mm-hmm.
I wrote this thing to a coworker the other day that might not be as profound as I want it to be or something, but it was
Yeah.
just the idea is like the reason that you ask questions is the reason you don't deserve an answer, because God has always been silent.
Mm.
And just the idea is that this is life right now, right? And the
Yeah.
reason you're asking questions is because of the perimeters of your ego and
Mm.
like your circumstance, your perception, the way it is right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, but you never, but like we're just so to me so unimpressive in this universe. Like the universe is so great. There were
Mm-hmm.
Neanderthals, um, and so then like so it just seems like you don't even deserve an answer.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this like anthropomorphic like cage that is getting you to performatively ask a million questions or whatever, right? And
Yeah.
then but then like no one you ever have known has talked to God in a way that you haven't.
Yeah.
um yeah, and yeah, the universe is bigger than the planet Earth and billions of years older, and the Bible was just written by men, and the
Yeah.
Bible's not even important in my
Mm.
mind, except philosophically maybe it is.
Mm.
Sorry if that shits on all of your beliefs, Brandon. I'm sorry.
No,
I
I'm
don't
just
know.
interested. I'm just
Yeah,
interested in what you have to say about
yeah.
the
It's
Bible. I
the
like that you
Bible.
say. I think the whole thing that you say with God is silent. I think that's pretty interesting. I think. I mean, there's like different ways to think about religious tradition, and there's like obviously there's like the literal interpretation of it, and it's like, oh yeah, like I was joking with a friend about this yesterday while we were hiking, and he was like, how did Moses collect like all the insects? Did he have like two of every insect? He's just talking about stuff like that.
Yeah,
But or sorry, Noah, not Moses, Noah.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Might
and
as
there's
well have
that.
been Moses.
Then there's like
Kiev.
then there's like the metaphorical take on it, where it's like, okay, these stories all mean something, but they're pointing to something else. And then there's like this mystical experience of the mystical religion, which is like a direct experience. It's like
Yeah,
what we're actually experiencing right now. And it's interesting reading people's accounts that talk about having like a direct experience of God, you know?
hmm,
Um, which it's not either of those things. It is like this direct experience, but it's also not. I mean, clearly there are some people that have had, you know, beings appear to them, which I know that's possible for people to experience through altered mind states.
yeah.
You can experience all sorts of things, you know.
I wrote
But
this thing, uh, but maybe this isn't that interesting. But it's just ghosts are personifications of that which haunts us.
sure,
But and the only thing I mean by that is just that, like, sure, people have things appear to them, but um, what were they?
yeah. Well, I mean, that's a whole other interesting question. Is like when people have whatever you want to call them, hallucinations, or they have magical experiences. like thinking about what we're supposed to do with that, and there's kind of this. I mean, obviously, there's the very scientific materialistic school of thought that's just like, oh, that's just like going crazy, and maybe there's more we need to do with those things. But then there's this other category of mystical experiences that is about like, I mean, I don't know this personally, but descriptions I've read of it are all about like this sense of like silence, like pervasive silence, this sense of like being one with God, and that like God pervades everything. And people use different words. Some people want to call that God. Some people want to call that something else. I know there's atheists that have like, had mystical experiences that are exactly the same, and they choose another word for it. I don't know. That's what came to my mind when you're talking about like God is silent.
Yeah.
That there's something to this idea of like, yeah.
Just, I guess, like, to me, I just like picture somebody praying during like in Auschwitz or something like this and receiving no answers. And then the entitlement of somebody in our circumstance, like saying it's like, no, God says something to me, or I get it or something.
Yeah, sure.
And it's just like, but it's like, no, nothing. Like I just don't think that there's been like any magisterial answers given to anyone at any point in history. That if there was a God, that he would be dead by now. Or just hasn't appeared to us. I don't know. It's very boring. I'm just an atheist.
Yeah. Okay.
But I don't know if I could say, this is a stupid other phrase I wrote just about meditation that it means nothing. And no, everyone's going to hate me. I want to be pretentious, guys. But it says, you are not your thoughts. You're merely what you recognize about your thoughts. And the only thing I think about that is just like maybe while I'm meditating, just that there's so many things you don't identify. Oh man. Do you know who Robert Sapolsky is?
I know the name. He's like a neuroscientist, right? Or something like that.
He's like a professor who's like a genetic biologist or something.
Okay.
But he has this, I recommend this. It's like a YouTube educational course or something. I think it's like 26 parts. And he just is going through genetic biology. And I think in the very first course, though, he has this experiment he's run, or people have run this experiment where they show people all these symbols like circles, squares, like, and then circles or symbols that we don't have names to give them, right? And he shows you all these things, or them all these things, and then you're just asked to count how many of the things you saw, right? And things that you don't already have like a word for, you don't notice as many of them, or you miscount them enormously. Yeah. And I just think that concept in and of itself is very interesting, because we're pattern detecting. And so like, think of all the stuff you missed just because the concepts are not already planted inside of you.
That makes total sense.
Yeah. I wanted to bring up just like the show. I didn't know the name of the podcast when we recorded the first episode.
Yeah.
And so I want to just talk about art if you still have time for more conversation. Yeah,
let's do it. Yeah, this is definitely I'm starting to go longer on these episodes. So
nice.
As long as you're up for it.
Man, I have to talk about art with you.
Okay.
Have you had any conversation with artists on this podcast?
I have, yeah.
No, well, have you? Let me ask. I just want to ask if you've seen or read a few things, just for my own reference. Have you read *The Idiot* by Dostoyevsky?
No, I've not read that.
Oh, okay. You've seen *The Square* because we watched it together?
Yeah, we watched *The Square* together. Yeah.
Have you ever seen the film *Yi Yi*?
No.
By Edward Yang?
No.
Okay, and then we both have seen Andrei Rublev together as well. Yeah. And you've seen *Birdman*?
Yes.
And let me think of one. There's one. Oh, yeah. And then I watched Rifkin's Festival recently at Woody Allen's new film. Are you a fan of Woody Allen at all?
Not as much as you, but I definitely have enjoyed some of his films.
nobody's as big of a Woody Allen fan as me. The joke everyone makes on podcasts is like not his film work, but just outside of that or something. But that's not my joke, though. I wouldn't say that. I like his films. Anyway, so there's this movie called Yi Yi, which I recommend to everyone. It's on the Criterion channel, Screaming to be streamed. And I just want to ruin the endings to all these films really quick. That's all. But there's this boy in the movie. He's like a little boy, and he takes throughout the film. He's just taking pictures of the backs of people's heads. And towards the end of the film, somebody asks him, "They're like, why are you taking pictures of the backs of everyone's head?" And he says, "Because I want to show people what they can't see." Right? And I feel like that is like one of the most profound ways to describe like what the purpose of art is. And for one, I just want to ask you what you think of that.
That's interesting.
As an artist,
that's one thing that it's been I keep coming back to over and over again is like, what's the purpose of art? How you define art? Like what is obviously like how to be an artist and like what is an artist? I think that's kind of connected to something I've been thinking about lately. I have this essay that I'm writing that I'm going to post soon about this topic.
Yeah.
But part of it is the idea of the connected idea of doing things that haven't been done before. And this connects to, there's a writer named Samuel Berja that I was introduced to through Peter Limberg, who's another like writer, interesting thinker guy. And he's kind of promoted this idea, and it's the idea of like the live player, which I think is related to the, like how I define art and being an artist. And that whole idea is like doing things that haven't been done before. Like a live player is someone that does things that hasn't been done before. A dead player is someone that follows some sort of script. You're just following scripts, right? And so I think
I see what you mean.
Like it's just like you're kind of just doing, following the program, whatever. And I think that's connected because to be able to do something that hasn't been done before, you have to see things that you can't see. How did you say it again?
Well, I mean, like I don't
showing
even know
people
how
what
they say
showing people what they can't see.
I want to show people what they can't see.
What they can't see.
Or
so I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
That to be able to act, like I feel like that's kind of like making art is about. Well, it's not just doing what hasn't been done before. I think there is kind of like some sort of value attached to it.
Yeah.
Because obviously you can be creative and do things that haven't been done before and be like a psychopath and do that towards some sort of like, selfish, destructive ends. But yeah, I was just going to say that, I think those things are connected. You have to be able to act. There has to be the possibility to act in a new way. And you can only do that by seeing new possibilities. Like that's,
I'm not calling you out or anything, but like, don't you think the definition that you're giving right now is sort of like social, right? Like, cause it's like, it's in reference to other artists and stuff like this, like where a work of art, like to me, it's like, you never know the context of an individual perceiving art. Right. And so to like make reference to like what other thing, like what something that somebody else hasn't done before seems like really arbitrary to me. Am I saying what you're saying wrong?
Well, I mean, it's all proven out. It's not just, there's kind of like a strategic quality to it. The effect, you can really judge that by the effect it has on the rest of the world. Like does it have an effect that's kind of like, that is unexpected? Like, is its effect unexpected and novel? And does it create unexpected effects that are like, that are objective effects? Like then it fits that definition, and there's kind of, it can be a strategic thing as far as like you are able to make certain moves or affect certain results because you're doing things that haven't been done before because they're unexpected.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Not only that, but I think I have heard about this research on people
Mm-hmm.
with retrograde amnesia. Do you know what that is?
Okay. Explain that.
So it's like people that could only record, or they don't record short-term or long-term memories or anything, so that they only have like uh, a minute and 30 seconds of processing
Okay.
or something
Sure.
before they reset or whatever.
Yeah.
And so like if you introduce yourself to one of them one day, the
Mhm.
next day they won't recognize you.
Yeah.
And so they have done these experiments with those people, though, and that are really fascinating. And I'm only kind of parroting what I've heard about them, but
Yeah.
like the idea is that in one situation they'll tell them a joke, and let's say it's a very funny joke, and they'll laugh, and then the next day you'll tell them the same joke, and they'll laugh less and less, even though they'll not have any memory of her hearing it any of the times, right? So
Yeah.
it's like there's this like subconscious thing that's still working. It's like, don't laugh at that. Like, you already know this. Like, there's still like pattern
Oh, yeah.
detection.
Yeah.
And then another way that they did this is that they had like a light shock that they gave to these people. Like, just like monkeys, they're doing experiments on these people. But like, so what they did,
they live in cages, and they tell them, "Oh, you're just staying in here for a day
Yeah, they
while
let-
we do this, and you're going to this great
Yeah.
hotel tomorrow."
yeah, they
Oh,
let
okay,
them out of their
okay.
cage all day for these experiments.
Yeah.
But then, so what they did is they'd have like somebody go in there that that they weren't familiar with or whatever, and they'd say like, "Hey, meet Brandon Dayton." And then when they went to shake their hands, like you would have like a shocker in your
Yeah.
hand that would
Yeah.
like give them like this negative. You would hurt them slightly, right?
Yeah.
And then the next day, they would be like, "Hey, here's Brandon Dayton. Like, do you know this guy?" And they're like, "No." And they're like, "Well, shake his hand." And they're like, "I don't like this guy."
Yeah.
And
yeah.
they wouldn't do it. It just, do you see how that connects to what you were saying, kind of like where it's just, you
It's
need
not
to
novel.
make something original, or it becomes a novelty, even if you don't recognize it, it's a novelty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that does connect. I mean, that says
Yeah.
interesting things about how the sub-processing of our brain and how little we actually have control about what we're doing any moment. But yeah, that's related. So
Okay.
so yeah, did you have other? Go on.
Yeah.
What else you were?
So I was talking to Ryan Otley about
Okay.
the same concept, just to say to
Yeah.
ask what he heard about, or what he thought about like that concept, the same as you, right? And
Yeah.
I thought it was very interesting because I connect this concept metaphorically, sort of like for, let's say, projects that I work on. Like, what am I trying to show people that they can't see or something, right? And it's like usually trying to identify like a part of the human condition or something, right? And then describe it and say, it's like, hey, this is what life is like, right? Like, but you'd never notice this.
Yeah.
But then Ryan Otley, though, when I gave him this, like he was saying, he was relating it to his art, right? And he's a comic book artist, if anyone doesn't know.
Yeah.
And he was talking about how he does these pen sketches, right? And he sort of exaggerates dimensions and stuff, and he like uses his imagination to put things on pen and paper, basically. And so that's sort of like the thing that people aren't seeing that he's showing people, right? And so it's more like very physical. And so I just liked that we had these two completely different sort of definitions, but they kind of worked in the same way. We've both seen the film Andrei Rublev. Yeah. Have we talked about that? And not to say that this needs to be a critique on Andrei Rublev.
I'm sure we've talked about
podcast
it. I
or
mean, we
anything.
talked about it
Yeah.
after, but yeah.
Like this film was like, I watched it with you for the first time. That's the only time I've seen it. But then, do you remember how the film starts? Or
Yes, it starts with there's a man trying to create a hot air balloon,
yeah,
right?
and he like jumps out a window, right?
Jumps out a window onto this
and he
hot, and
crash lands.
there's a bunch of people about ready to attack him as he's
Yeah.
creating this hot air balloon, and he's got like a little team that's helping him, right?
I
And
forget if
then
he has a team or not. I know
yeah,
he
they're all
jumps
trying to
out the
help
window
him,
and tries to
and all
fly
these
though,
people. Yeah,
right?
he tries to fly. He's like riding on top of the balloon, and the balloon crashes,
And
right?
then at the end of the film, like, or I think in the middle of the film, like there's some lines of dialogue that reflect like this kind of concept where it's like um, being alive is to be a sinner, kind of.
Hmm.
And I just this is just like one meaning I take out of that movie, which is just that like to create art, you have to jump out of windows, right? Like to be an
Yeah.
inventor, you have to
Yeah.
like put yourself out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there are a lot of movies I think that have this same theme. Have you seen Birdman?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think
We
I
talked
asked.
about that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I just feel like this movie has the exact same premise as Andrei Rublev,
Mm-hmm.
like where um, if you remember Michael Keaton at the end, like he shoots himself in the face or something, and this is what turns him into Birdman.
Yeah.
And then he has to like jump out this window to see if he could fly, pretty much, right?
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so I just love that sort of premise for like what it is to be an artist, right? Like how to be an artist is to jump out windows, right? And
Yeah. Can I make a like suggestion of like add into why that's important, like why we need that?
yeah, I want to hear
Because I
what
don't
you
know if
say.
that's necessarily obvious. We say like, oh, you got to show people what they haven't seen. You have to jump out of windows. And again, I think this is about breaking us out of patterns,
Hmm.
or breaking people out of scripts. I'm reading this book right now by a neuroscientist named Mark Lewis. It's called The Biology of Desire,
Okay.
and he wrote a previous book called Memoirs of an Addicted Brain that I'd like to read. But he's a neuroscientist, but he was also an addict, like all sorts of addictions when he was younger. And so he's talking about like addiction. His big thing is about like addiction and how he thinks about addiction. And the way that he kind of frames addiction, I think this model is really shown in his previous book because he doesn't talk about it quite so much in his current book. But he talks about this idea of reciprocal narrowing, and his whole idea is that addiction is is a process of feedback loops,
Hmm.
where with each iteration of the feedback loop, your choices or your perceived choices, your perceived options narrow. It gets like smaller and smaller, right? Until you get to the point where it's like because of the choices you're making, it's like you're just in this loop where your whole life and your whole attention is just focused on you feel this way, you go do this action, and then it puts you back in this other place, and you just kind of repeat this loop, right? And that's
Hmm.
like the most extreme form of addiction is it's all about like, oh, I'm just going gambling every day, right? Going
Okay.
gambling. Everything is about setting up my life so I can go gambling. And it's this very, very extreme, like limited um, loop we get stuck in. But you can see that in all aspects of our lives that we get stuck in all sorts of little limiting loops. Like it doesn't have to be necessarily like addiction per se, but the way we do things in our society, the expectations we have personally, the expectations we have of each other, we're always getting stuck in these loops. And like the way I've kind of been thinking about it lately is that art is kind of the other end of this spectrum. It's like opening up, and what you're talking about this as far as like seeing what you can't be seen, jumping out of windows, is about breaking out of these loops that opens up like possibilities for how we can do things.
Yeah, you
Does that
have
make
to
sense?
like,
Does that land
yeah,
with you?
I could see that link. And like just the way that you asked the question at the beginning though is like put it in more context. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I could simplify like what it means to be an artist. I think that there's risk involved in bearing your soul to people,
Sure.
right? And so that this is a form of suicide, right? Like you're putting yourself out there because you could die out there. Like you're, and it also reflects how I felt on that mushroom trip about leaving my house or whatever. It's all like
Mm-hmm.
a form of, well, especially since like we're like temporal. So like
Mm-hmm.
we exist right now and like we're different than when we started this podcast by far.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um, and so it's just like, I don't know. So I like this saying, is suicide is at the start of every story.
Dude, this is actually one of the big themes of the podcast lately too, has been like the importance of like metaphorical, and not even metaphorical death, but accepting that like that death is a part of like personal progress. It's
Yeah.
so funny we're talking about suicide, but just allowing parts of ourselves to die so new parts can
Yeah.
be reborn. I mean, which is kind of a similar idea. These loops we get into, we feel like I can't give this thing up. This is me. I'm gonna like and you know, you let that part of yourself die, and then a new part of yourself can kind of be born. Like those are kind of connected, right?
Yeah, like there's this my second book, like the theme of it was there not that it's just a redefinition, right? To watch something live is
Mm-hmm.
also to watch it die, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I just think that like we're like these creatures that so often like, and I wonder if this has to do with those like habit circles that we're talking
Mm-hmm.
about and addiction and stuff, like these comforts, right?
Yeah,
Like where like we want to accept life for the happiness. Is this goes back to like what you were saying about your own like meditation and stuff like this too, right? um but then um well, so like we kind of like don't want to have negative thoughts or something, right? And
mm-hmm.
it's like sort of this rejection. Even when you just recast it, it's the same thing, but
Mm-hmm.
you're like in denial of the version that seems negative or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But both are true at the same time. And so like to show somebody something they can't see is just reminding them that both definitions are true.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's over my own head or something.
Got to jump out of some windows every once in a while.
I think yeah, yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Pain and Glory?
I don't think so.
It's by Pedro Almodovar. I just like ruining
Okay.
the end of movies for people. Um,
I've
but
watched
good.
a couple of it, two or three of his films, and I
Which ones
just
have you seen?
let's see. I saw Julieta, I think it's
Wow.
called, which is a more recent one.
Oh yeah, I've seen that one.
What Live Flesh?
Love it.
Live Flesh?
Yeah,
I don't get them.
you
Like I
don't
don't
get
know what
it.
it is. I don't get it.
Yeah,
Like I watch his movies and I'm like a bunch of stuff happened, but I don't get the whole
jeez.
point of it. I don't know
I
why it
feel
is.
yeah,
But
sure. I think I think you should watch Pain and Glory anyway.
okay.
And the other one I love, but maybe you wouldn't get it. You would get it because this one I think to me is like more visceral. Like it's just like good because it's good or whatever. But
Hmm.
like the one I love a lot is called I think it's called The Skin I Live In. Have you ever
Okay.
seen that one? Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
El Piel que yeah,
Oh,
how does
okay,
it
you
go?
know.
Yeah, I remember it has a Spanish name.
Pain and Glory is like
Que
kind of this like
Inhabito, I think that's it.
partial
Yeah.
autobiography though,
Hmm.
where there's like Antonio Banderas, like who was an actor who worked on all of his early films with him,
Hmm.
but like stopped working with him for like decades or something like that for some
Hmm.
reason because of just like some animosity or like maybe like somebody didn't get enough credit or something like this. But
Yeah.
like they kind of have like, so Antonio Banderas plays like a director in the film though, and there's like this actor who's just like gone to drugs and stuff like this, who was like his like star that won't work with him anymore. So it's sort of partially autobiographical, but just they just like kind of like show, or in the film to me, and I think they do show this, but like it's just like he's just like putting his own life into his art, right? Like this is what art is just like pouring yourself into things.
Hmm.
And then they ask this question though, they say, how do you know if a man lived a good life or a bad life? And then and they answer the question, I think in a very satisfactory way though, and they just say, you just have to wait to see, right? And it just me because we contain all these things, right? And that's just another way of saying what I'm saying. And
Yeah.
or the way I was saying before, that's maybe less confusing. It's a great movie though. I recommend it highly.
Pain and Glory.
Pain and Glory. If you like, so, but you didn't like Live Flesh though. It didn't do anything for
Yeah,
you.
I don't know what it was. Sometimes it's like you just don't have the right. yeah, you're just like not coming in with the right mindset. It just doesn't connect in the right way, you know. You were going to talk
Um,
about the square too. There's something
yeah,
about the square that.
yeah. So like, do you remember like what do you remember like kind of the concept of the square
Oh
or like?
yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, absolutely.
So like, just I just always think about that film now. Like it's
Mm.
one of the most important films to me, and I like that guy's previous film. His name's Ruben Ostlund,
Yeah, the other
and
one was the one about the
Force
skiing
Majeure.
one, Force
Yeah,
Majeure. Yeah,
both I think both are very good.
yeah.
But in the square, you have this concept of like it all takes place in an art museum,
Mm-hmm.
and you have this empty box, and the concept of the square is that like we're these stupid mammals, like we're just like chimps that make all these mistakes and everything, but
Mm-hmm.
then if we put our minds together and make these agreements or like understand the rules of the game, like what to do inside the square, then we
Mm-hmm.
could be better than that, right? I guess to me, like the square is like asking what we should really do in real life to be better than our monkey selves or whatever, right?
Yeah.
I guess like one way to relate it though is just I talk to Alan quite a bit though,
Mm-hmm.
and he always makes this dichotomy that I kind of think
So you're
applies
talking about
to.
Alan too,
Oh yeah,
our
Alan
mutual friend
too.
Alan too. I'm gonna need to
Yeah,
have him on the podcast. So I
I
did lunch with him a few weeks ago, but yeah.
yeah I love Alan. He's a great guy, but he always just like he has just this economy that he loves, which is just comparing people to children or adults, kind of.
Yeah.
And I kind
Yeah,
of
he talked about this when we
sure.
got together
Can
last.
you remember anything that he said about it? Because I sound like an idiot right now.
No. It's his. I think if I understand correctly, is that he's talking about like childishness. Like that's the
Yeah.
word he used with me. Like using childishness as a way to kind of like. He's gonna be upset. I'm gonna probably get it wrong.
Yeah.
Kind of as a way to like measure how we are thinking about things, I guess. You know, does that sound right?
Anything sounds right because I mean I sound clueless, but I'll just say that like I guess like I was just trying to map on his like kind of dichotomy to
Uh,
inside and outside the square, right? Like where
yeah.
it's just like acting like you're a higher level mammal is to just act
Yes.
like an adult, and outside of the square is just acting like a child.
A child. No, I think that's an interesting way to think about things, and I think it's worthwhile for us to think about things in that way. That like, okay, maybe there is still some maturation we all need to do, both like individually, but also like collectively. We engage with a lot of life just kind of with this idea of this is the way things are, and never considering that it could be that there's a lot more we need to figure. There's some growing up that needs to happen, that there's maturation that needs to happen, which I like that concept. And it's kind of one of the big ideas behind like metamodernism is
Mm,
this idea that one kind of this next phase of change in the world really needs to focus on like personal development.
yeah,
um we get so focused on like leaders and leadership and like, geez, if we get the right leader in place, that'll solve the problem. But leaders always become a reflection of their constituencies. It's like you can swap out as many leaders as you want, but they're still leading the same populace, and we're going to affect how they lead. We're going to pressure them to lead us in the way we want to be led. So at some point, we all need to grow up in some way. We all need to develop into more mature human beings.
yeah.
Um,
Man,
so I think
yeah.
I think that
I
idea is like really interesting to me.
I like how you're like because I was just thinking myself like it's like why am I even saying all this like because what how does this map onto reality for me like where are people acting like children and where are people acting like adults and such,
Hmm.
and for some reason like I didn't make the connection to connect it to politics at all.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's actually the perfect place
That's
to
the biggest
apply.
place.
Yeah,
And everyone knows it too. Everyone's
Yeah.
totally aware of it. That's a really good example, because that's one of those areas where I think almost everyone is aware that we could be doing better.
Mm-hmm.
But what I
Yeah.
don't think people are aware of is that like the solution starts personally. Like there's this I heard this brief clip with Rick Doblin
Yeah.
on Joe Rogan. Did you ever listen to Rick Doblin?
No, I've never heard
He's
of
like the lead guy behind like MAPS, which is like this research group for like psychedelics.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about this experience he had when he was on ketamine, and he had this like vision of like Hitler at like, where did they have the big rallies? I can't remember where they had the big rallies.
Germany.
They'd have these in Germany. Someone's in Germany. They're having these big rallies, and like he just had this feeling like if I could just get inside Hitler's head, I could like change the course of history.
Mm-hmm.
But then as he was kind of like sitting there observing things, he had noticed everyone like, Hitler would do like the Heil Hitler, and everyone would do like the Heil Hitler back to him,
Yeah.
And he started realizing that the Heil Hitler was a way of like transferring power. It's like everyone in the crowd is like giving their power to Hitler every time they do this Heil Hitler.
Yeah.
And he had this insight of, oh, it's not about changing Hitler. It's about changing everyone in the crowd.
Yeah.
And I like that way of thinking about it, is that we think politics are so absurd and immature.
Yeah.
But it starts with us
Totally
changing our lives, becoming more mature individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And that will naturally ripple up to having actual mature leaders once we become.
You're saying all the stuff I forgot to say while I was talking about the square, because it's just like,
Okay.
it's like, because getting inside the square is like bettering yourself first, right? And that's
kind of what happens in the movie, right? Is it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
there's this interaction he's having with this like kid, where he's just being this total asshole to this kid and not taking responsibility for his actions.
Totally.
And kind of the end of the movie is just him taking responsibility and being sorry. I can't remember what exactly the details of it, but apologizing and making amends for that because the whole movie is all these people having all these high-minded discussions about society and culture and art. And then at the end, it's just like him taking responsibility in his life and making amends with this kid. So,
you reminded me of this comic that I wanted to make a long time ago. That it's kind of another non sequitur or whatever, but it just has like I forgot all about Adolf Hitler at the beginning part of the conversation, but now that you brought him up, but it was just this idea. It was called Quantum Bleep. Okay. And the idea is like there was this person that could go back in time, but they could only change history by touching things with their dick. And so then but then you just imagine like Hitler right before his like biggest speech or something. And if somebody just like shoved their dick right in his face, like right before he went out or something, like, couldn't that change the course of history too? Like,
maybe. I don't know. Maybe that's what caused the problem in the first place.
Oh,
Jason.
yeah. Like maybe they sent history into a spiral, a downward spiral.
Yeah. Hitler had too much dick.
No. Yeah. I was just going to ask you more about politics. I guess, like, is there anything that you're like, I just like wonder your political alignment kind of. I just want you to take a side.
Okay. I kind of talked about this in my last podcast where I was with Chuck Marone. So that might kind of explain a lot of this, but I think
I'll listen to it.
I think that one's a great one to listen to. I think he's fantastic. And the stuff he says about art was really cool. I kind of am like, I don't want to belong to any tribe. I know someone else said this. Actually, Alan quoted something by, I'm forgetting his name. He's kind of one of these young intellectual, kind of more conservative black guy. And I'm blanking on his name.
John McWhorter?
No, not John McWhorter. No. John McWhorter is older.
Oh, young. Coleman Hughes, maybe?
Coleman Hughes. Yeah, Coleman Hughes. And he says something to the effect of like, I want to be a member of the tribe that like, I'm not going to say it right. That like doesn't have like an enemy or something like that. I'm totally butchering it, but I don't want to be part of any sort of tribe that that feels like it's more righteous than some other group.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
so I mean, in general, I don't really want to affiliate with any political party.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as my orientation goes to politics, like I want to focus like hyper local. Like I kind of feel like this gets to meditation. Like my politics is meditation. My politics is like figuring out my own life and like my own mind. And then it's like, okay, then it's figuring out my own home, my own family. Like that's my politics right now. And I think this gets back to what we're talking about, maturity.
Yeah.
Like I need to be a mature individual. I need to be mature in my life. And then it's about like relationships, like building mature relationships. And then I, you know, just figure out how to make life work within my own community from there.
What is your social media presence like?
Not much.
Not much.
Most of what I do on social media is just like when I write something or when I have a podcast, I'll post something about it. Every once in a while, I'll post some thoughts on social media too.
Hey, send me that essay when you write it.
I will. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Right.
Yeah. I kind of, the only reason I bring it up just because social media is interesting to me. I've gotten off of it mainly.
Yeah.
Like I deleted Facebook years ago. I like still have an Instagram account, but it's not like it seems like I get some sort of I'm not getting a boner by telling you that I'm not like super active on social media or anything. Thanks a lot, guys.
Yeah, well, this is going to really throw off sending you back in time to interrupt Hitler.
I like stopped posting on Twitter though. I just like to me I don't know why, but like just social media, like any time I spend on there just feels like such a waste of my time, I guess.
So getting back to this addiction stuff and feedback loops, I've been kind of obsessed with feedback loops lately. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of what happens on the internet is that I like to look at it as a feedback loop. Like, is it a feedback loop that is affecting me in my life in a way that's making my life better? Because there's definitely like a positive feedback loop in the sense of, you know, not as a value judgment, but as far as, you know, positive, it feeds on itself. You know, I go to social media, it affects me in a certain way, and the way it affects me brings me back to social media. And it's most of what happens on social media is unhealthy. It's this unhealthy feedback loop. And I've been thinking a lot about like the internet as far as like what we really need to figure out with the internet is creating a feedback loop that makes us better people, that when we use it, we leave. And this may sound so obvious, but it only becomes more obvious when it actually starts to happen. But we need an internet where, and I think podcasting is one of those examples. Like podcasting is something that I do and I come back better for it. And that it brings me back to podcasting. So I'm really interested in seeing what things come after social media, or maybe even how social media evolves, but that they can become these positive feedback loops. Yeah. That are also positive, that are also like, like generating positive, like making our lives better. And social media isn't doing that right now, but I think there's a potential there is a potential for the internet to do that in some way.
Yeah. Like, I guess, or even just in limited, like there's like limited capacity to do it. I don't know. Like, do you have any constructive thoughts on like how to make social media productive for people that aren't very reflective?
I had this experience. I've been participating in this online community for the last little bit. I'm not going to mention it,
sure,
because I don't know. Like it's pretty new, and I mean, not that a lot of people from my podcast would end up going to it because I don't have that many listeners. But what's that?
Nothing. I was just saying it's like some like. No, I don't want to say what it is.
Okay, but anyway, actually, so you don't know, but the community is really focused on they do like a lot of like events. So there are a lot of these like Zoom events that they'll organize.
Okay.
And all the Zoom events have like certain subjects or topics. So it isn't just a forum. And you have like these Zoom events. You're actually seeing people, you know, even though it's not in person, you're still seeing actual people. And they're doing like I've done a couple of these events where you do like a practice that's called circling. And I don't know a lot about it, so I can't explain it, but it is meant to be one of these practices that is supposed to be a more mature way for people to kind of engage with one another. And I really had that feeling. I just did this 2 weeks ago, doing one of these sessions, a Zoom call, going through one of these practices. I just had kind of this feeling of like, oh, this is like the potential. This is kind of like what we wanted the internet to be. I'm here meeting with people from all over the world, doing this practice that then could be like, I could learn how to do this practice here. And then that comes back to my real life. And I try it out in my real life, gain feedback from my real life. That gets uploaded back to the internet. And like, oh, here's what you have people from all over the world then uploading their best practice to the internet, updating kind of like our global knowledge base. And then we download it again into our like local lives.
Can you like say what a practice might be?
Yeah. So so something like, in this case, like the practice it's just like kind of a set of guidelines or a technique or set of rules, or set of instructions for just how a certain group of people might engage with one another. And these can either be like kind of norms for how they always engage, or it can be just during a certain time period. So it can be like meditation. Like meditation, I have certain techniques I do while I'm meditating, and a practice can be something like an interpersonal practice can be something similar. Like you get together with a group of people, and then you're interacting with each other according to certain rules. I mean, like group therapy is kind of an example of that. That's like a practice, like an interpersonal practice, and there's lots of different versions of that. There's things like empathy circles, like authentic relating is one, circling is another, and they're just kind of like these frameworks for how people interact with each other. And so you kind of literally practice like interacting with each other under these certain guidelines. And I don't know, there's still so much I don't know about it. And I still can't really say like, oh, here's the benefit of it. Or, I just still really new to this stuff, but I'm just saying that because I got a sense of, oh, this is potentially an alternative to this other way of interacting online. That is like, I mean, one way of looking at social media is that before we had all these pathologies that were contained by being kind of separated into these local communities.
Yeah.
And our little pathologies can be contained and they wouldn't really spread. But with social media like amplifies certain like human pathologies, where suddenly these kind of personality disorders, these unhealthy ways of relating to each other, they just get amplified. Like, it has this viral quality to it, and it can just cause like disastrous results. Is suddenly we're shaming each other on this massive global scale that's just actually having huge consequences, like destructive consequences. It's huge polarization we see happening, distortions of information, things like that. So it's like, like we're scaling up these pathologies rather than can we scale up, like benevolence? Can we scale up the best qualities of human beings while we like dampen our pathology? So this experience was kind of like this experience of like, oh, here's a potential way that I could see this happening through this kind of different way of doing things,
Yeah. I'm like all ears for any ideas, like, cause it just seems like I just don't see, I see almost no good, but like, just, I'm thinking more about like the example of the square or whatever, like where, and just thinking of how you could apply that to like what's going on the internet. Because, and I was thinking about Russian bots, right? Where, I like at first, like when I first heard about Russian bots, I think like, oh no, this is a terrible thing. Like you're getting people to believe all these crazy things or something, right? But then if you run into them at some point though, right? And you say like, oh wait, these bots are just retweeting what other people in the country believe too already or whatever,
Yeah.
right? And it's just
Yeah.
like sort of like
It's amplifying what's already there, right?
amplifying what's already there. But then
Yeah.
the example or with the square or whatever, I guess like the idea, I think in some ways is like being an adult and like doing due diligence and not being convinced by bad information or whatever, but also holding people to that standard. Because I feel like that's how you make things better, right? Is
Yeah.
like you can't. I feel like politics. What I don't like about it is that you're trying to get people's votes, and so you talk to the dumbest person in the room, right? But I feel like the only way to raise the bar for intelligence is to talk to the most intelligent person in the room and then get people to raise their standards, not to. So does that make sense at all?
Yeah. I mean, conceptually, I kind of like the idea. I don't like using the words like the dumbest and the most intelligent because that's so context specific.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah. I totally get what you're saying there.
Yeah. Right.
You could think, like, everyone imagine better words to use there. Because there definitely
you
are
can just
some.
say it's like it's more about engaging the best of ourselves rather than the worst part of ourselves.
Sure.
And there's definitely a lot of intelligent people out there that are acting like total infants, that are just acting totally childish, right?
But
and idiotic.
This is what you were saying about the people with Hitler and everything, though, right?
Yeah.
Where it's just like you have to hold them to high standards, like to not listen to the dictator or whatever, right?
We all need to hold each other to high standards, right? It's like, right? I think that's a huge part of it. But I mean, it's about creating a context where that actually happens and doesn't just turn into like shaming each other and attacking each other. Yeah. Because I do agree with that we need to be able to hold each other to high standards, but that requires more mature relationships. It requires us to trust each other enough that you and I, for example, could hold each other to high standards. Yeah. And instead of us weaponizing it and using it as a reason to like turn the other person into an enemy, we actually use it to like mutually increase our standards. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's so many people yelling about like science and like evidence and you know, but they're just using it to make other people look like idiots, you know, and to benefit their own side. They aren't raising any standards by doing that. Does that make sense?
I think so. This like just where I asked you about politics and you gave your answer that like I mean I like basically like that's how I feel too. Like it's like useless to kind of affiliate your something to like a set of ideals that don't change relative to answers that you need or something, right? So it's like if you have an ideology already and then the situation calls for different
absolutely
answers, then that ideology is going to just be a hammer for the wrong tool for the situation, right?
Sure.
And in that way I kind of view just political leanings as religions and like those doctrines as dogmas.
That's kind of how I feel right now too.
And it really but when you I don't know, and then to me that it just makes me kind of like want to buy out of the whole system or whatever though. And you kind of mentioned this and I'm gonna like it's safe to shit on Hillary Clinton, right?
Sure.
Just kidding. I don't need to. But no. It's just to me. It's just like it just seems like voters determine what she would say, right? So it's just like gay marriage is bad until this many people agree with me, and then it's good.
Then it's good,
or something like this.
Yeah.
And so it's like these are just, and you said this way earlier, but it's just like that those people are just like kind of like sounding boards for the voting majority or whatever. But then they don't necessarily have ideas for themselves, and I don't know, it just seems like such a bad system to me.
I think one of the things that actually kind of gets me hope is that a lot of people I talk to are just aware that what we're doing is just not working. I mean, and some people's responses are just not helpful. Some responses are just like things aren't working, and so let's blow everything up, which obviously there's problems with that too. And I do see other people that are aware of like, okay, things aren't working, but we can't blow things up. And being overreactive to this stuff isn't working. And I'm just noticing there's a lot of people that are aware that we got to do something different.
Yeah.
And that kind of gives me a little bit of hope. Like because there's a lot of cynicism when you hear it, because people are just like, oh man, this isn't working. But like the fact that so many people are aware it's not working, like that's maybe a good sign,
That's a good sign. Like, and actually, this is just like do you remember like you came to like a book reading I did like many years ago?
Yeah.
Like that story, it had this sentence in it that it was like a concept like where it was just this. It was those who sit the closest to the light are the first to go blind. Right. And I just like how that, and it's like condemnation of religion though. And I think political religion as well. And then what you're saying, and I think that it's sort of built into this concept though, is that the light's not a bad thing necessarily. It's sitting too close to it. Right. And I feel like that's sort of like what you're describing, those people, right? Where it's like, they're getting away from it. So that's like, they're not losing sight of it, but then they're separating themselves for it so that maybe there is some clarity or that you could use a light or something.
Wait, say that again. I don't know if I'm following you there.
Oh yeah. I don't think anyone's following me. No, I guess like, so you were talking about this category of people that's recognizing the problems of the system.
Okay. Right?
Yeah. And I'm just saying that this is sort of like the people that are now like, they're not sitting so close anymore as to be blinded themselves.
I like that metaphor a lot because it's like you have to kind of commit to some direction, but it is about just not holding that too tightly and not turning that into the truth.
Yeah.
And just saying like, we got to find a way forward. And we got to figure out the best way for the least. I mean, there's this group called Less Wrong. Have you ever heard of like Less Wrong?
I haven't heard of it.
It's this group I think it's part of like the rationalist movement, but they're kind of just like answering questions and figuring out policy is one way to think about it. Is just like, what's the least wrong way to do things, which gets you away from the dogma, right? Because it allows you to always recognize that any solution is imperfect. And so it's just like, what's the least wrong solution that we can find for moving forward, right? Instead of the right solution, because the right solution, then you start contracting around that and protecting it. And it becomes this holy thing that you have to kill other people to protect,
I was saying this about my own like psychology towards myself, but that like just forgiveness is the first step though. But I just think that this is actually universal, right? So that it applies to any relationship that you could be having. Because like when people don't forgive their spouse for something, they just become passive aggressive or something.
Oh, sure.
Like,
absolutely.
Remember you fucked that guy or something like that. And it's just like, I just think that just is universal is all. And I forget how it applied to what you were saying, or I guess the Less Wrong movement, I guess we were talking about.
Yeah.
I guess I think I was just connecting it, and just that I think I don't know how I was connecting it. It's like Less Wrong. It just seemed like it was the same thing. I don't know.
Yeah. There's something there. Yeah.
Yeah. I called everyone idiots, but I'm also an idiot. Maybe the final thing I'll just bring up, like, because I like getting art projects wrong. You're gonna read The Idiot someday, right?
I think I'd like to. Yeah, I like Dostoyevsky.
Have you read which of his books? Have you just read Brothers Karamazov?
I read Karamazov in high school. I read Crime and Punishment.
Yeah.
But Brothers Karamazov, I have more of a affinity for, because I think I was a little more ready for it. I don't think I really was like ready for Crime and Punishment in high school.
I wonder. I read The Idiot. Probably. I mean, it's probably been 2 years ago now. I was thinking about reading it again though. I liked it. it was the one that connected with me the most of his books that I've read. But in it, they have this like sort of parable called the Poor Knight. Have you heard of this at all?
Mm-mm.
But it's this idea, and where like what a knight does is he picks a princess, right? And he knows nothing, almost nothing about her, just that she's a princess or what he thinks is a princess. And then what the knight's duty is to protect the princess, regardless of whether she's a whore or not, right? Or to break the spear, I think they say, to protect her. And the reason he's a poor knight is from the outside perspective. Like if you see somebody that's dying for a whore, it's just like how sad that this person's duty held them into this position, right? And I think that it felt clear enough to me in the book that Dostoyevsky's talking about people's opinions when he's talking about the metaphor of the poor knight, that we are poor knights, right? So we first like have it's actually kind of, to me, it's actually Dostoyevsky being 100 years ahead of his time and saying the exact same thing that's in Jonathan Haidt's The Righteous Mind, right? Where he's saying it's like, no, you explain, you rationalize, you have your lawyer say, give you a rationalization for what you've just already decided. You pick your princess or whatever, and then you'll just keep defending that position because you don't want to be wrong. And anyway, I think the book The Idiot is just really brilliant, so I was just going to tell you that.
I need to read The Idiot, apparently.
There's a lot more to it too, which I won't spoil necessarily, but like the main character, Prince Mishkin, highly likable. I think you might really like it.
Okay, cool. I'll check it out, man. Well, I think we might have just broken a record for the longest episode of the podcast so far.
I hope it's not the most boring, but
some really interesting stuff. Yeah. If anyone is still with us at this point, they deserve a medal.
Thanks. Thanks for talking to me, Brandon. I hope everything went well enough.
That was fantastic.
You've been listening to How to Be an Artist. To support this podcast, you can go to patreon.com/H2BNA.